The human mind is the standard. It may be our own mind. There's nothing wrong with what my father did, you might say. It may be the mind of others, like Dr. So-and-so. Faith in the human mind as a sufficient reference point for itself will not work. Unbiblical methods always reflect man's ideas. All right? Now, the first one that we're going to talk about, if you have your outline, is I didn't turn out so bad. That's what it's called. Sadly, many parents go back to how they were raised, whether it was biblical or not. I suppose there's a difference here if you were raised in a biblical home, if you were raised with a biblical parents, and things were done according to the Bible. I know what it's like to be at your wit's end with your child, and sometimes it's not so easy to react biblically, and we all remember what that's like. What has this parent done who just says, it was good enough for me? I mean, it worked for me. I turned out all right. What they have done is he has unquestioningly accepted and employed the same method of child rearing his parents used. He has not assessed whether it's biblical. He has not looked to see whether it had a good impact on him. He has simply drawn from his survival that it wasn't that bad. I didn't turn out that bad. You know, in my family, in my situation, I was the oldest of 6 kids, you know that, and my mom was sorely outnumbered. And I can only imagine I didn't realize at the time, but she must have been wanting to pull her hair out many times. But I could look back at this and I would say, that's sort of how I feel. Like it worked for me. And like I say, if you weren't raised in a biblical home or in a Christian home, it might not be the same. But I feel that way sometimes myself. Our second example is pop psychology. Pop psychology. I recently heard a talk radio guest discussing motivating children. His approach to the problem was bribery. Bribe your children. Get your children to do something for money. You can, what does it say here? Use your power as the adult to make bribes that encourage the behavior that you desire. Your son won't clean his room? Bribe him. Each week he keeps his room clean, he gets a new Nintendo game or $5. All you have to do is be creative enough to find a bribe that works for each of your children. Obviously, not a godly or not a biblical example. These approaches are superficial. The point of appeal in bribery and contracts is self-interest. Bribery latches onto the evil in the child's heart and uses that as motivation. So the child's not doing it because it's right. The child's not doing it because he should. The child's doing it for the money. The child's doing it for the bribe. Obviously, that's not the right reasoning. It says the child is not taught to look out for the interests of others. The child learns nothing about being under authority because God is God and the parent is his agent. The child does not learn biblical reasons for integrity, responsibility, and the neatness in having his room clean. These methods will not be satisfying to the parent who understands that the heart determines behavior. It does train the heart, but it's not in biblical motives. And my thought was, this is how we would train dogs. This is how we would train a pet, with a simple reward or a simple bribe, I guess we could say. And maybe you know the reference to Pavlov's dogs. When he would give them a little bit of food, he would ring a bell, and they would start to salivate. Pretty soon they would salivate just at the sound of a bell. There didn't have to be any food. And our kids would be salivating or doing what we want them to do just at the thought of $5. Maybe you just have to pull out that little money. Oh, and they straighten up. I don't know. Behavior modification. The idea is simple. Reward good behavior in some tangible way, and ignore or perhaps punish bad behavior. While I'm not against praising children for doing what is right, I reject the notion that children should be rewarded for fulfilling normal responsibilities. I don't think you can reward a child every time they do something right. I mean, we do something right. We make decisions multiple times a day, and not every one of those can receive a reward just for doing something normally right. Behavior modification. Hebrews 11:6 says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." So I'm not saying that all rewards are wrong. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying we can't reward everything, every little thing. Not all rewards are bad. I know we have a couple of blanks there that I didn't hit on. Since the heart and behavior are so closely linked, whatever modifies behavior inevitably trains the heart. And another one, but your methods inevitably instruct the heart. The heart determines behavior. Determines behavior. Another family in the book, they took a little piece of paper and would write the child's name on it. Every time they did something right, they helped with dishes, they set the table, they swept the floor, they took out anytime they did any little thing, they wrote their name on and put it in this jar. At the end of the week, a name was drawn, and obviously, the more times your name is in the jar, the better chance you have of being drawn. And once again, that wasn't biblical either. Talk about time consuming. My word, putting a name down for every little thing that was done. And the system effectively moved this family away from biblical action, springing from biblical motives. Let me note in passing that biblical incentives and rewards are not an end to themselves, but rather the outcomes of obedience to God. There is temporal blessing attached to obedience. The God who knows our hearts calls us to right behavior for the purpose of honoring him. He says in 1 Samuel 2:30, he honors those that honor him. Our next example of a poor method would be emotionalism. Emotionalism. This would be the same method that was used by the mother at the airport, getting to the child's emotions of being alone at this strange airport, or being told that she didn't love her, she didn't want her. It's a terrible way. You could do it in a kinder way. I've heard parents that say, it makes me feel bad when you disobey. It makes me feel like I'm not doing a good job of being a parent. And it's putting the emotional plea out to their child. Another variety of emotion appeal is to shame a child. A young girl in this book here is routinely shamed with threats about her actions spoiling her father's reputation as a community leader. The appeal is not to obey for the glory of God, but to protect her father's reputation. And I could see that as a pastor and having pastor's kids. I'm sure that that's happened to Tom and to his family. The girls maybe are not physically told, hey, you got to watch out for your dad's reputation. But I'm sure they would know. They're old enough to know, anything I do will bring judgment on my parents, on the way I'm being raised. And it's not the right way to approach your child. Another one here is another example is where they gave their child a timeout in the middle of the living room, and they put them in a chair, and nobody could talk to them as long as they were in their timeout. And she couldn't talk to anybody, and nobody could talk back to her. And when the 7-year-old was asked, what makes her so sad about this punishment, she said, I'm saddest most when I'm on the chair and my daddy is home, but he won't talk to me. It doesn't seem right, and it's not right. While she is likely to become hardened to this method of discipline, we may expect it to have a long-term effect. She may be driven by a lifelong desire to please her parents and secure their approbation, or she may internally distance herself from her parents in order to be insulated from further hurt. Whether she is compliant or rebellious, she's not learning to live out of the desire to know and to serve God. Here's another one, punitive correction. That's what jail is, punitive correction. Some parents utilize a punitive approach. These parents use the threat of punishment to control their children. There are many variations on this theme. The punishment may be being hit or yelled at. The punishment may be simple privation of something that the child desires. The attempt is to keep the child under control through the negative experience of punishment. I'm not decrying, or I'm not rejecting the biblical teaching of the rod, of spanking. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that is the same thing. But not to spank when you're angry, not to spank when you're mad, not to spank when you're frustrated. And we all get mad, and we all get frustrated, and we all get angry. And that's not the time for the corporal discipline. Grounding is perhaps the most common form of this example of punitive. Many kids are grounded at the drop of a hat, grounded for a week, grounded for 2 weeks. I think it sort of loses its effect. It's not corrective. It's not corrective. It's punitive only. He's not learning to understand the deceitfulness of his heart. He's not learning God's ways. He's not being taken to Christ, who can enable a young boy to know how to serve God. I believe it's done because it's easy. It's easy to say, you're grounded. It's sometimes not so easy to enforce it or to keep checking on it, but it's easy to say it. Whatever it is, it's not shepherding, and we're talking about shepherding a child's heart. It's not shepherding. Grounding is quick, incisive, simple. You're grounded for a month. Go to your room. It's not realistic either. They feel the parents don't know anything more constructive to do. They feel frustrated, and we've all been there. They don't know how to get to it. They feel they need to respond in some way. One thing for sure, grounding does not address the issues of the heart in a biblical way. The heart is being addressed, but is addressed wrongly. The child will learn to cope with the grounding, but it may never learn the things that a godly parent desires for him to learn. This is not related, but when I read this addressed wrongly, it made me think of something because I'm thinking of the kids at camp. I was a camp counselor for many years, and it's very near and dear to my heart, and I don't think that probably anybody in here has any kids at the high school camp right now, but I think they'll have a youth camp. Don't they have a youth camp for younger kids? Do they still have that? Maybe? What's that? Oh, okay. Okay. I just remember when I was in youth camp, my mom would write me a letter. I mean, everybody wanted to get mail, but hardly anybody did. My mom had to write that letter and mail it probably before I even left. Before I left for camp, she was writing a letter, and my name would be called at mail call. Man, that was a great feeling. It was addressed to me. All right, that was just a side note. All right. This kid has learned how to live under house arrest. This punishment of grounding does not address forgiveness that the child should seek and should look for, and it does not address the forgiveness that can be granted by the parent. And I've been granted forgiveness in my life. I told you last time I was up here, I had a little rough time at the age of 50 years old, which is older than most of you, but I had unconfessed sin in my life. Back when I was 35 or something like that, I had stolen from an employer. I had stolen, plain and simple. I mean, I tried to justify it. I wasn't being paid enough, and so I had to help myself to some extra benefits or whatever. But it finally got to me. It finally broke me down. And I had to write him a letter and send him a check. And that's what I did. And that in itself didn't take care of it. But when he wrote me back, he said, I didn't know about this, because in my letter I said, you may know that X number of years ago, I was doing this. Because he was a smart guy. He probably could have figured it out. I don't know. But he said, no, I didn't know. And when I got your check, I thought about just throwing it away. But I wanted you to realize and have the full forgiveness. And him telling me that I was forgiven, boy, that was a great feeling. That just lifted everything off my shoulders. I've not seen him since. He's still alive, not living in our state, but I've not seen him since. But someday I look forward to seeing him again. All right, here we go. The next method is erratic eclecticism, something like that. It's in your book, and it might be on your sheet. I think it is. This approach is exactly what it implies. It is erratic in that it moves about. There is no consistency. No consistency. So, like, you might get an idea when you're in the checkout line looking at the tabloid, the Reader's Digest, or something else, get an idea about how to raise kids. And, hey, that sounds like a good idea. And you try something, and then you read something, or you see something on TV. Hey, that sounds like that should work. Or somebody else tells you, hey, this is what worked for me. And you're hopping all over the place and jumping back and forth. It's sort of how I approach gardening. I love my plants, but I will do anything that somebody suggests. You know, you're watering too much. You're watering not enough. You need to add some fertilizer. Give them some fertilizer. Not that kind of fertilizer. You know, so it's one thing after another, and we can do the exact same things as parents. It's erratic. This list is only suggestive. We need a biblical methodology. Evaluating unbiblical methods, they lead to superficial parenting. They only address behavior. They don't address the heart. Biblical discipline addresses behavior through addressing the heart. If you address the heart biblically, the behavior will be impacted. Parenting that focuses only on behavior does not address the heart. The problem is that the heart is addressed wrong. Changing behavior without changing the heart trains the heart towards whatever you use as your means. If it's a reward, then your heart is trained towards a reward. If it's being grounded, their heart is trained that way. So I know that my grandkids, which I guess I do some training when they're at my house, I notice that they'll antagonize each other just to get me to yell at the one that's supposedly doing the antagonizing. And I don't know that it's right, but I often will say, if she cries, you're both going to get it, whatever it is. You're both going to get, or you're both going to be punished in some way, because you're just antagonizing, and she's just crying so that I'll yell at him. She's not hurt. She's not hurt at all. But she's doing it just because she wants me to yell at him. So sometimes they both get punished. When the experts tell you that you must find what works with each child, what they're really saying is that you must find the idols of the heart that will move each child. Your child is covenantal creature. The heart is a wellspring of life. All right? The gospel is not a message about doing new things. It's a message about being a new creature. We have to work towards the heart. Let's imagine that we're dealing with a child and his failure or her failure to do homework. We can talk about, I think it's on our sheet as a 3 or 4 approaches. The bribery approach. Do your work and I'll take you to a game. That would be bribery. Emotional approach. Please do your work. I get so upset when you don't. It makes me feel like crying. I wonder where I went wrong. The punitive approach. You didn't do your work, so no TV for a week. If you fail again tomorrow, it will be no TV for 2 weeks. And then we have behavior modification. For every day you do your work, I'll put your name on a piece of paper and put you in the special reward jar. And then, of course, the one that we mentioned first, and that is, I didn't turn out so bad. It worked for me. While each of these approaches might accomplish something, they're not accomplishing the training of the heart. It is hoped that each has resulted in getting the kid to do his work. The question is this: how can you move from any of these approaches to the precious, life-giving truth of God, that God sent his Son to set people free from sin? The above approaches don't lead to the message of the gospel. The heart is being trained, but it's being trained away from Christ and the cross. Character development is ignored. The emphasis is on getting homework done. Children are not being trained to make ethical choices as responsible people living in reverence for God. They are learning how to jump through your hoops that you set up and avoid your displeasure. They learn to make their choices based on expediency rather than on principle. Children soon see through the implicit and explicit manipulation. They eventually come to resent the attempts to control their behavior. Oftentimes, they'll become rebellious as they enter their teenage years because of such a thing. All right, so at the end of every lesson, I know you have questions, and I'm not going to hit them. I think they're on your sheet if you want to. This is our last paragraph on this, is remember, God is not concerned with the what of parenting. He is concerned with the how of parenting. The Bible speaks to the issues of methodology. What direction does the Bible give us for dealing with these issues? The next chapter addresses that, and I'm going to attempt to get through the next chapter. I don't know how I'm going to try that, but we have 12 chapters here, and I think we have 9 weeks to do it. Obviously, it can't be done at the rate we're going, but we're gonna go on into chapter number 8, which is embracing biblical methods, and then Tom won't be able to be the good cop all the time. If we reject the methods that we evaluated briefly in our previous chapter, what do we do in return? What light does the Word of God shed on our approach to parenting? God's Word must inform not only our goals, but also our methods. Methods and goals should be complementary. You want your child to live for the glory of God. You want your child to realize that life is worth living. Any life that is worth living is lived under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Your methods must show submission to that same Lord. Methods designed to produce well-adjusted and successful children won't work because your goal is not simply success and well-adjusted children. A biblical approach to children involves 2 elements that you weave together. One element is rich, full communication. We're going to start with that one. And the other one is the rod. In the book of Proverbs, we find these 2 methods side by side. I'm just going to give you the references. In Proverbs chapter 23, 13 through 19. I know you've probably read it before. Do not spare the rod and spoil a child, basically. And then Proverbs 23 through 22, and Proverbs 23, verses 26. You can look those up as you get a chance. Now, I'm not going to be here for the rod chapter, as it were. In fact, this says that we're going to be talking about communication for 3 chapters, chapter 8, 9, and 10. And then the rod in chapter 11. And actually, I like that ratio because the communication is at least 3 times as important as the rod. And I won't be here, like I said, for the rod, but I can tell you that the rod worked in our house. The rod definitely worked in our house. And I don't mean that we had to spank our kids a lot. I don't think we had to a lot. Well, I was just talking about that with Joyce. Sometimes our memory fails us. We don't remember how often or whatever. But I can remember time after time where a child would be spanked, and it would be a solemn thing. It would be a discussion about why this is coming, what rule was broken, what the results were, and why this was deserved. And oftentimes after the spanking, the child was closer to me than they were before. And it is a very effective method. God has given parents authority by calling them to act as His agents in child rearing. The emphasis on rich communication prohibits cold, tyrannical discipline. It provides a context for honest communication in which the child can be known and learn to know himself. The rod and communication must always be woven together in the actual shepherding of children. In order to study each, we will separate them, and I told you about chapters 8 through 10, and then chapter 11. All right, we need to talk to our kids, but talking to our kids really is a one-way thing. We're talking to them. We need to talk with them. We want them to talk back. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. You remember what Charlie Brown's teacher sounded like in the classroom. Wah, 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 wah. And that's, I think, how we sometimes sound to our children. If we're just talking and talking, and they're not talking back. We're not getting anything back, and we need to get something back for them. We often think as communication as the ability to express ourselves. Accordingly, we think of ourselves as talking to our children instead of talking with our children. I already mentioned that. We need to understand our kids. The finest art of communication is not learning how to express your thoughts. It's learning how to draw out the thoughts of another. to understand your child. Many parents will never learn these skills. They will never discover how to help their children articulate their thoughts and feelings. There's a certain irony in this. When children are little, we often fail to engage them in significant conversation. And they try to engage us, they want to talk to us, and they talk, and often we're busy. We're always busy. And we'll we keep doing what we're doing, And it's not much of a conversation. And I think they probably get that. They understand what's going on, that we're really not listening. We're really not talking back. And then as a teenager, they don't really care to talk to us. I mean, how was your day? Good. What'd you do today? Nothing. And it's really not good communication, as I'm sure you know. They give us an example in here. We had a talker in our family. We had 3 boys, and one of them was a talker, and he married a talker. And their kids are talkers. And I'm not telling anybody who it is because I don't want it getting back to them. But they'll talk you. They talk up a blue streak, as somebody would say. All right? But we need to talk back. We need to get some understanding out of them. Our focus is on understanding. Your first objective in correction must not be to tell your children how you feel about what they have done or said, but you must try to understand what's going on inside them. Inside. The scripture says that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Matthew 12:34. We must get an understanding of what's going on inside. What's important in correction is not venting our feelings, our angers, or our hurts, but it's understanding the nature of the struggle that our child is having. What's important is understanding the why. Why something has been done or something has been said. You need to understand not just what has happened, but what's going on within your child. Remember, it's out of the abundance of the heart. If you can understand and help your child to understand these things, then you will be on your way to understanding the why something has transpired. I'm going to jump down and talks about a conversation that a parent has. You can imagine this. The boy is in junior high school, and his parents just bought him expensive, in my world, expensive tennis shoes, $88. And yet he's not happy because he's going to be called names. He's going to be mocked. They're last year's models. They're not the newest, the greatest, and everybody's going to make fun of him. And we all know what it's like being made fun of. And kids have no comprehension. They have no filters. They will say what's on their mind, and they will mock mercilessly. In fact, there's actually, we know what it's like. Some of us know what it's like in a hen house. There's a pecking order, and somebody is always at that bottom of that pecking order. And I can tell you, as a camp counselor, there was always somebody in that cabin that was at the bottom, receiving the pecking of the other kids. And that's how kids are. And the funny thing is, when you rescue that child from being pecked and mocked and made fun of, when you rescue them and you get them up above, maybe feeling a little bit better, somebody's a little bit lower than them, they turn right around, they forget what it felt like, and they peck on the next kid that's underneath them on the totem pole. All right, so you imagine what it's like to be called names and stuff as a school kid, especially maybe junior high or high school. You must strive to discern matters of the heart. Proverbs 20, verse 5 says, "Counsel in the heart of a man are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out." As a parent, you want to be such a person of understanding. Think about the incarnation of Jesus Christ. He could have stayed in heaven. He could have stayed in heaven and happy as can be. He could have spoken like God did in the Old Testament, but he chose a much better thing. He came down to earth, and he lived just like we live. He suffered and went through the things that people in his day went through. And so that when we read Hebrews, I'm going to read it. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. "Seeing then that we have a great high priest that has passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I don't know, as a matter of fact, that we've gone through every temptation that our kids are going to go through, but we've gone through a lot. You can remember the things that you went through in school, the things that you went through as a young man, as a young woman, the temptations that you faced, and your kids are going to face those and probably a little bit more, probably a little bit worse than you even faced. But you can speak from experience and tell them how, or help them with how they can overcome. Jesus can look at the world through his eyes, and he can look at the world through your eyes. And as parents, you can do the same thing. You can look at the world through your child's eyes. Dealing with disobedience is a wonderful opportunity to draw alongside your children. As you learn their internal struggles with sin, you have an inside track. After all, you're just like them. You're a sinner. You're a sinner just like them. You will have to develop the skill at probing the heart if you want to really understand your child. Most parents have had a disciplined conversation like, why were you doing that? Why were you hitting him? I don't know. What did they do? I don't know. And that kind of stuff, we need to get down to the why. We need to ask better questions. I can remember, we're coaches, and I can remember being a coach. I can remember coaching baseball, and I can remember the instruction part of the coach, telling the kids, hey, stay down on that ball. That ground ball's hit to you. Yeah, it could take a bad hop and jump up and break your face, but stay down on it. Try to make the play on that. That's instruction. Or an example. We've got some wonderful example coaches here at the school. I can remember Dave Cook. Maybe some of you can. He would be there coaching the kids on the soccer field, and on Sunday leading somebody to the Lord at the altar. It was a wonderful example. I love to see that. And another one, I can relate as a coach that really cared. I've had players come to me crying because something that they did on the field that wasn't up to par, and they made a mistake, and maybe it cost the game or something. And I've had that feeling. And as parents, we are coaches, and I think we can relate to that. The why you did it line of questioning never works with children. Why did you do that? Because they won't answer right, and it doesn't really work with adults either. All right, so we have some other questions that we can ask. Here are some other questions that we can ask. What were your feelings when you did this offense, when you did this crime, whatever you did? What were your feelings? Maybe I was mad. Maybe I was frustrated. I was angry. I was jealous. Those are some examples. The next question. What did the perpetrator do to make you so feel this way? All right? So once again, she hit me. She spit on me. She said something. She made a face at me. We have kids in our Sunday school department. If they look at somebody wrong, they're ready to come to blows because somebody gave them the bad eye. All right, next question. How did hitting, kicking, spitting on, or make things, or what any of these, make things better? Sometimes a question like this will just make them realize the error of their ways. If you said, how did spitting on your sister make things better? They would have to look down at their feet and say, I guess it didn't. That was a stupid thing to do. What was the problem with what they did to you? I mean, sometimes kids are truly wronged. And boy, kids don't forget truly wronged. That just brings me to a thought of my brother Jeff. We were at another family's house. They had 6 kids. We had 6 kids. We were friends here at church. And I did something. I threw something in the house, not supposed to do. I threw something and it hit. And my dad thought for sure that Jeff did it, and he marched right over there. Jeff, why did you throw that? You're going to get it. You're going to get it when you get home. And, I mean, he was embarrassed in front of the friends, in front of his siblings, although that didn't matter, but in front of the friends, that mattered. And, boy, Jeff never forgot that. And, of course, I didn't pipe up and say, hey, it was me, Dad. I let Jeff take the fall for that one. But he never forgot that. I think if you talked to him today, he would still remember that. Here's another question. In what other way could you have responded? Instead of hitting back, instead of kicking or spitting, what other way could you have responded? Our last question here. How do you think that your response reflected trust or the lack of trust in God's ability to care for and protect you? These are really thought-provoking questions. They're not easy, and they take a lot of time. And raising kids is not a quick thing. Although the time goes quick when you look back, but it's not quick in the moment. It takes a lot of time. It's easier just to slap, yell, send somebody to their room, give them a timeout. But maybe if it started early enough, and if it's consistent enough, it might end up saving you some time. On the other side here, I've got 4 issues that you must walk your child through. The nature, number 1, the nature of the temptation. It affects every one of us, temptation does. Every one of us and every one of our senses feels temptation, whether it's taste, smell, sight, touch, sound. We all face temptation. Number 2, possible responses. When you face that temptation, you're going to have a response. Whether you cave in and give in to the temptation as an adult or as a child, that's one response. Maybe you're going to reject that temptation like Joseph did in the Bible when Potiphar's wife wanted to sin with him. He just rejected it. Said, I can't sin against my master. I can't sin against my God. Or maybe you're going to try to find some middle ground, maybe just this once, or I'll just do it a little bit. I'm not going to do it much. And our kids are the same way. Those are possible responses. Number 3, a motive for our response. We might say, hey, you only live once. I'm going to give in to this temptation. Or, it won't really ruin my testimony. Yeah, maybe somebody will think something, but it's not going to really ruin my testimony. This is a good one for kids. It's not fair. Kids will always say that to you. It's not fair. It's not fair that he got to do this or that I can't do that. How about this one? It wouldn't please my Savior. That's a good motive for a negative response to a temptation. Our last one is a sinful response that the child chose, because if he didn't choose a sinful response, he wouldn't be having this discussion with you. If he had made the right choice and he had not done what was wrong in response, it would probably go unnoticed. So sometimes we have to notice the good things that our kids do and notice when they face a temptation and they come back with the right response, a right response to that. And as we wrap it up here, one thing I'm going to say, and it's not part of the lesson, and that is, don't talk about your kids in front of your kids. Now, we start that when they're little tiny, and they don't understand a word we're saying because they're infants. But it doesn't take long when we say, oh, he's just a little devil, I can't control a thing he does. They start to catch on to that. They start to know that. And the more you talk about it, unless the only time to talk about your kids in front of them is if you're praising them. You know, he came across this incident the other day, and somebody needed help, and he stopped what he was doing, and he helped them. I was just so proud of him. It's fine for them to hear that. But don't let them hear about how, yeah, they're so bad. They're always trying to get away with something. Don't let them hear that kind of talk about them. I'm out of time, and we're going to have prayer. And I didn't even pray before we got started. I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to pray now. Lord, thank you for this lesson, the double lesson that we hit this evening. How to raise, how to correct our children biblically, and how not to follow some of these unbiblical methods that are so easy for us to fall into. Help us to take the time, Lord, to communicate, to get feedback from our kids. Take the time to do things right, Lord, because we know that we'll be rewarded in the end. Thank you for everybody being here tonight. Please give us safety. We pray for some of these requests that were mentioned before church, people in the hospital. I'm thinking of Norma Okuma right now. I pray that you will help her. And we ask these things. Bless our kids in camp, Lord. Bless them spiritually as they're under the sound of preaching every day, a couple times a day, Lord. I know what a change it can make in their lives. Help us not to be cold water when they come home and try to put out the fire that's in their heart, Lord. Bless us now. In Jesus' name, amen.